In the quiet suburbs of Dallas, Texas, the Johnson family appeared to be living the American dream. Alicia Johnson, a devoted housewife in her early 40s, spent her days maintaining a pristine home, caring for her family, and managing social events for their tight-knit community. Her husband, Marcus, was a respected architect whose projects adorned the city skyline, making him a well-known figure in the community. Together, they had built a seemingly perfect life, raising their 18-year-old son, Caleb, and enjoying the perks of suburban success. However, beneath the surface, Alicia's life was not as flawless as it appeared. Marcus's long work hours and constant travel meant that Alicia often found herself alone, yearning for connection. That void was filled when she struck up a friendship with Ethan, the 20-year-old son of their neighbors. Ethan, a college student with a charming smile and a casual demeanor, often helped Alicia with errands or joined her for coffee when Marcus was away. What started as friendly gestures soon took a darker turn. Alicia and Ethan's conversations became more frequent, lingering beyond their usual chats. Alicia, flattered by the attention of someone so young, found herself confiding in Ethan about her frustrations and loneliness. Ethan, drawn to Alicia's maturity and elegance, reciprocated with his own struggles, creating an emotional bond that blurred the lines of their relationship. It wasn't long before their friendship crossed into dangerous territory. A stolen kiss in the kitchen one afternoon turned into secret meetings and whispered conversations. The thrill of the forbidden relationship consumed them both, but they were careful to keep their affair hidden from everyone, especially Marcus, who remained oblivious, absorbed in his work. However, secrets have a way of surfacing. The once harmless meetings in coffee shops turned into more risky encounters. Alicia's once organized and controlled life began to unravel as she became consumed by guilt and paranoia. Ethan, too, was increasingly erratic, torn between his infatuation with Alicia and the looming threat of their secret being exposed. As the weeks passed, the pressure of their secret began to strain Alicia and Ethan's forbidden relationship. Alicia, once a picture of grace and poise, found herself increasingly distracted and anxious. She avoided social gatherings, fearing that someone would notice the change in her demeanor. Marcus, who was often too busy to pay attention, started to sense something was off. Alicia's nervous energy, her late-night texts, and frequent absences sparked a flicker of suspicion, but he brushed it aside, attributing it to the stress of maintaining their busy household. Ethan, on the other hand, became bolder, pushing boundaries that had once been clear. He began dropping by unannounced, sending Alicia risky messages, and even making subtle, suggestive comments when others were around. The thrill of secrecy had turned into a dangerous game, one that Ethan was playing recklessly. One evening, as the Johnsons hosted a neighborhood barbecue, Ethan made a careless mistake. Alicia was serving drinks when Ethan approached her with a sly smile, brushing his hand against hers in a moment of unguarded intimacy. Marcus noticed the fleeting touch, the way Alicia stiffened and Ethan's lingering gaze. The image stuck with him, unsettling and out of place in the middle of what should have been a carefree evening. Later that night, Marcus confronted Alicia. His questions were laced with anger and confusion, but Alicia, caught off guard, denied everything. She dismissed his concerns, chalking them up to paranoia. Yet Marcus's doubts were now firmly planted, and he began watching his wife and their young neighbor more closely. The tension between Marcus and Alicia grew, each conversation tinged with unspoken accusations. Alicia's once comforting home felt stifling, and Ethan's behavior became more erratic as he sensed the unraveling of their carefully hidden secret. Each stolen moment now carried the weight of impending disaster, and the once thrilling affair began to feel like a ticking time bomb. The tension reached its peak on a stormy night in early November. Alicia and Marcus's arguments had become routine, each one louder and more bitter than the last. Marcus, now fully consumed by suspicion, had begun digging deeper, checking phone records and piecing together every odd behavior he had ignored. Alicia's denials only fueled his anger, and the once peaceful household was now a battleground of accusations and mistrust. Ethan, feeling the pressure of Marcus's growing scrutiny, became desperate. He couldn't bear the thought of losing Alicia, and in his desperation, he began suggesting more extreme solutions. Late one night, he cornered Alicia in her kitchen, proposing that they run away together, leave everything behind. Alicia, horrified by the suggestion, realized just how far their relationship had spiraled out of control. She tried to end things, but Ethan's grip on her was tighter than she had ever imagined. The breaking point came the following evening. Marcus returned home early, determined to confront Alicia with the evidence he had gathered. As he stormed into the house, he found Alicia and Ethan in a heated argument. Marcus's presence startled them, and in that split second, the truth was laid bare. Marcus's fury erupted, and the confrontation quickly turned violent. Ethan, panicked and cornered, grabbed a kitchen knife. Marcus, blinded by rage, lunged at Ethan, and a brutal struggle ensued. Alicia screamed, trying to separate them, but it was too late. In the chaos, Ethan lashed out, stabbing Marcus in a frantic attempt to defend himself. Marcus collapsed to the floor, the life draining from him as Alicia watched in horror, her world crumbling around her. The room fell silent. The only sound was the storm raging outside. Ethan, shaking and covered in blood, realized the gravity of what he had done. Alicia stood frozen, unable to process the violent turn their secret had taken. The affair that had once been their escape had now led them to an irreversible tragedy. The moments after Marcus's death were a blur of chaos and disbelief. Alicia stood paralyzed, staring at her husband's lifeless body sprawled across the kitchen floor, blood pooling around him. Ethan, still clutching the knife, was overcome with panic. The reality of what he had done crashed down on him, and his mind raced with the consequences. His breaths came in short, frantic gasps as he dropped the knife, backing away from the scene in horror. Alicia's instincts finally kicked in. Trembling, she grabbed her phone and dialed 911, her voice barely coherent as she reported the stabbing. Ethan, shaking uncontrollably, tried to leave, but Alicia blocked his path. "You can't run," she whispered, her voice breaking. "It's too late." The police arrived within minutes, the flashing lights casting a harsh glow on the once serene Johnson home. Officers flooded the scene, and within moments, Ethan was handcuffed and led away, his face pale and expressionless. Alicia, still in shock, was questioned on the spot, her tearful account barely making sense to the detectives trying to piece together the events of the night. As the investigation unfolded, the true nature of Alicia and Ethan's affair came to light. Text messages, emails, and witness testimonies painted a damning picture of their illicit relationship. The neighbors, once so admiring of the Johnsons' picture-perfect life, were now abuzz with gossip, each new detail more shocking than the last. The media quickly picked up the story, dubbing it the suburban seduction, a scandal that spread like wildfire across the city. Ethan's trial became a media spectacle. The prosecution portrayed him as a young man consumed by obsession, manipulated into violence by a relationship that never should have happened. Ethan's defense argued that he acted in self-defense, caught in a volatile confrontation that spiraled out of control. They painted Marcus as a jealous, angry husband whose rage drove Ethan to protect himself. But the jury, swayed by the evidence of the affair, Ethan's erratic behavior leading up to the murder, found him guilty of second-degree murder. Ethan was sentenced to 25 years in prison, his future stolen by a moment of desperation and a forbidden love that had gone horribly wrong. Alicia, although not charged as an accomplice, faced a different kind of punishment. She became a pariah in her community, her reputation in shambles, her life reduced to a shadow of what it once was. Friends and neighbors who had once looked up to her now whispered behind her back, their judgment as harsh as the courtrooms. But the real punishment was internal. Alicia was haunted by the choices that had led her to that fateful night. Every room in her house reminded her of Marcus, of the life they had built and then destroyed. She was plagued by guilt, not only for her husband's death, but for the role she played in leading Ethan down a dark path. She attended therapy, seeking redemption and answers, but the scars ran too deep. Months passed, and Alicia's attempts to rebuild her life were met with constant reminders of her past. She moved away from the neighborhood that had once been her sanctuary, settling in a small apartment on the outskirts of town. Alone and isolated, she took a job at a local grocery store, far removed from the social circles she once navigated effortlessly. The vibrant woman who had once hosted community events and charity dinners was now a ghost of her former self, existing in a world that had moved on without her. One afternoon, as she was stocking shelves, Alicia saw a familiar face in the checkout line. It was Ethan's mother, her eyes red and tired, carrying the weight of her son's fate on her shoulders. They locked eyes for a moment, a shared look of understanding and grief passing between them. There were no words exchanged, just a silent acknowledgement of the pain that had touched both their lives. Ethan, now serving his sentence, spent his days in prison reflecting on the choices that had led him there. He wrote letters to Alicia, filled with apologies and regret, but she never responded. She read each one, though, and kept them tucked away in a drawer, reminders of a relationship that had cost them everything. Ethan became a model prisoner, taking classes and participating in therapy, trying to find some semblance of redemption. But the shadow of that night never fully left him, a constant reminder of the irreversible damage of his actions. As years passed, the story of the Johnsons faded from the headlines, replaced by new scandals and tragedies. But for those who had been touched by the events, the impact lingered. The neighbors still whispered about the woman who had once been the heart of their community, now living a quiet, unremarkable life far from the spotlight. Alicia, in her solitude, found a strange kind of peace. She spent her days volunteering at a local shelter, trying to make amends in small, quiet ways. The work gave her purpose, a way to channel her pain into something meaningful. But the past was never far away. In the stillness of the night, she would often lie awake, replaying the moments that had led to Marcus's death, the choices she couldn't undo. In the end, the affair that had begun as an escape from a lonely marriage became the very thing that defined Alicia's life. It was a story of passion turned poison, a cautionary tale of how easily desire could turn to destruction. Alicia would forever be marked by her actions, a reminder that some secrets come at a cost too great to bear.